Troublemaker, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 3. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, Open Road Media. Narrator, Eric Ost. This one is dedicated to Ken Thompson. Chapter 10. Ragged plastic pennants fluttered overhead, yellow, red, orange, on slack wires between corroded floodlight poles. Dave walked among second-hand cars toward a small wood and glass building in the weedy rear corner of a blacktop lot. Pat Farrell, Good Used Cars, the tin sign read. We carry our own contracts. The cars were filmed with dust. Lettered on their windshields in chalky pink paint were false claims. Low mileage, clean factory air. All power, stick shift, sharp, even cherry. Along with the prices, the dealer knew better than to expect. Pat Farrell's was the kind of lot you walked in onto with cash. If you were smart, you chose what you wanted and didn't listen to why it was worth the $350 it was marked. You pressed down on the upholstery, frowned under the hood, kicked the tires while the salesman followed you around, talking. Then you waved a $100 bill under his nose and drove out with $25 worth of scrap metal, cracked plastic, thin rubber, and the pink slip in your pocket. At the foot of the plank stairs to the sales office was parked a European Mini like the one that had died under Vern Taylor on the coast road yesterday morning. Gas saver was lettered on the glass, especially when it stalls, Dave thought, and climbed the steps. The office door stood open because it was another hot morning. Inside, a man sat at a yellow wood desk whose top was covered by the spread-out classified ad pages of the Examiner. The man was circling ads with a felt-tip pen. His suit hung loose on him. A cigar was clenched in the teeth. An electric fan blew from the top of a tin file cabinet in a corner, ruffled his greenish toupee, chased the cigar smoke out through the glass lavars of a side window. He looked up, dropped the pen, laid the cigar on the desk edge, where earlier Burns had made black fluting. "Morning." He stood up, held out a hand, where thick flesh must have patted out his cheeks once. A smile gathered back, loose folds on either side of his mouth. The show of teeth was tobacco dingy, but the voice had warmth and a high gloss. "Pat Farrell, what can I do for you, sir?" Eyes like cheap green glass measured Dave, and as the smile died. "No, you don't want a car from me." Dave laid a business card on the gray print pages. It was the card Billy Wendell had given him day before yesterday. When will he be in?" "He won't be." Farrell dropped into his creaky swivel chair again. Above his head, a fly-specked sign read, "Your credit is good with us." "I fired him last week." "That's not the way to put it. Makes me look bad. He fired himself. I warned him a dozen times. If he came on the lot drunk again, he had to go. But..." Shoulder bones moved inside the bulky suit. "You feel sorry for them?" "Hell, Billy knows his business. He's good when he's sober." "And when would that be?" Dave asked. Yeah," Farrell breathed a sour laugh. "Well, I just hoped the shock might help him. I hated to do it. He's old. Nobody else is going to take him on. Everybody in the business knows him. I was his last chance, and I put up with a lot for a long time. I'll take him back, too. Told him so if he'll quit the bottle. Nobody can do that for him. A man's got to do that for himself. Look at me." He put fingers inside his shirt collar to show how loose it was. "I know what I'm talking about. Not drink, no food. Love to eat. Doc told me it was killing me. Either I lost 100 pounds or I could plan on dropping dead here one of these days." "You lost the weight," Dave said. "Congratulations." Farrell wagged his head. "Haven't lost it all yet. That's why I'm wearing my old clothes. Looks like I borrowed this suit from somebody, doesn't it?" He plucked at an ample sleeve, laughed, picked up the cigar, clamped it in his teeth again. "I'm just waiting till I get down to 165, then I'll buy new duds." "I need Wendell's home address," Dave said. "Don't think he's there." Farrell stood up again. "I went over there yesterday to try to find out a little more about a contract he wrote that somebody skipped on. His landlady thinks he took a run out." She could check with his ex-wife, Dave said. Farrell's eyebrows went up. Never knew he had one. He never said anything about her. Their son died, Dave said. He saw the notice in the paper. He hadn't known where they were, so he says close to 40 years he went to the funeral. Never mentioned them. Farrell opened a file drawer, brought a manila folder to the desk, sat down and copied an address on a notepad. He tore off the slip, pushed it across the open newspaper to Dave. That's the dump where he was living. Always made me feel bad when I saw it. I mean, I was paying the man a decent wage. He didn't have to live like that. Liquor is expensive. Dave folded the paper and pushed it into a pocket. Thank you. What's your interest in Billy Farrell? Followed Dave to the door. You're not a cop. You're not a bill collector. What's your line? Insurance, Dave said. Death claims. Farrell squinted. Something wrong about the boy's death? Everything. Dave started down the steps, turned. Did Billy Wendell owe you money? Farrell turned down the corners of his mouth. I advanced him 20 here, 50 there. Never kept count. You weren't pressing him hard for 1,500. The skin crumpling smile again. It looked ghastly in the bright sunlight. I'm good-hearted, but I'm not a fool. It's been 30 years since I let a drunk get into me for that kind of loot. No, maybe 100, 200 at the outside. I kissed it goodbye when I gave it to him. You've seen him. Lighting a cigarette, Dave nodded. Then you know a man wouldn't expect loans back from Billy Wendell. He'd work overtime for me when the wife and I had a date or went to Vegas for the weekend or whatever. I got it back that way. When he was sober enough to trust, Dave gazed off across the dully glinted car tops, watched the anxious, frantic flutter of the little ragged flags, calling no one from the empty, sun-stark boulevard beyond. You thought I might be a bill collector. Why? Did they come around? Did they want you to garnish his wages? Say, for a bill like that, $1,000, $1,500? You telling me his son was murdered for money? Possibly. Dave shrugged. $1,500 is missing off his desk. He lay dead by the desk. Nah. Pat Farrell shook his head decisively. He wouldn't kill anybody. Not Billy Wendell. He had his faults, but he wouldn't kill anybody. He didn't need a large sum of money to stay out of jail, Dave asked. Again, nobody was closing in on him? Nobody knew he existed, Farrell said. Then he saw at the far corner of a lot a Mexican youth in a buttoned shirt, without a tie, a fat brown girl carrying a baby in her arms, peering into a broad, low-slung maroon convertible with high tail fins and flashy hubcaps. He bolted past Dave down the steps and, suit flapping, jogged across the tarmac, holding out his hand. Grinning, his voice drifted back to Dave on the warm breeze. Howdy, buenos dias. What can I do for you folks this beautiful morning? Isn't that a beauty? That's what I call a sharp automobile, and a steal at that price, an absolute steal. The street was broad with a center divider where abandoned streetcar rails turned to rust. Among dry weeds and clumps of sunflowers across the way, a chain-link fence with barbed wire closed in vast gas storage tanks. Up the block, boxy stucco buildings made a corner, Lucky's Bar and Grill. The others empty. For rent, signs curling in the windows. Here in the middle of the block, a red neon anchor and the word motel tilted at the top of a steel post above a square of cement block units. Painted clay color, ivy geraniums struggled in the hard dirt between a cracked sidewalk and the small windowed walls. Blacktop covered the inner courtyard, where a greasy motorcycle stood with pieces of itself scattered around its wheels, and there was an automobile that would have discouraged even Pat Farrell. Spiky upthrust of tired Spanish bayonet guarded the car entrance. A red and white sign beside a Dutch door on the cabin to the left said, "Hi, ring bell for service." He rang the bell, and a cat came from somewhere and rubbed its yellow stripes against his legs. He crouched and scratched its ears. It purred. The top of the Dutch door opened, and a knobby-jawed woman gave him a smile. She wore a crisscross halter and shorts of a Hawaiian material whose hibiscus had faded many voyages ago. There was nothing Hawaiian about her look or her talk. They were strictly Little Rock, Arkansas. We got lots of room, she said. She rattled up a clipboard on a chain from inside and laid it on top of the lower shelf. There was a ballpoint pen on a braided nylon cord. Take your choice. I'm looking for Billy Wendell. Dave handed her his medallion card. Unit 9, someone told me. That's right. She opened the lower half of the door and stepped out. Her skin in the sun was dead white. She was all eyebrows, knees, collarbones. But he's not in it. Hasn't been here 3 days. I don't expect him. You're going to find him. Because when you do, remind him he owes me 3 weeks' rent. Place is nigh empty. I got to eat too. Tell him. Isn't this your good season? Dave asked. I don't have a good season, she said. Can I see his room? Dave asked. Before the police. Police? She gulped. What's he done? A member of his family met with an accident. Dave said. That person was insured by my company. We have a set investigative routine, you know? He gave her a smile. All right. Or is the room rented? Fat chance. Here. She reached inside the door where keys jingled. No, forgot. Maid's got it. Cleaning up today. Look for her. She turned her head, sniffed. Damn! I boiled that coffee. She vanished back inside. The cat jumped up on the shelf, knocked down the clipboard, and followed her. Next to the door of 9 stood a square canvas laundry hamper on wheels. Sheets draggled from it. The door was open, and inside the room a vacuum whined. He peered in. A shadowy female with a white cloth tied over her hair sullenly pushed furniture. Dave stepped inside. The maid was black and young. She didn't appear even to glance at him, but she said, Ain't ready yet. Closet door stood open on emptiness. Big shabby slacks and jackets lay across a grudging upholstered chair with greasy arms, hats, a worn raincoat, 2 pairs of cracked shoes. Dave picked up and dropped a tangle of stained neckties. Did he leave anything else? You the man? She glanced at him this time, but without much interest. Ain't been through the drawers yet. She jerked her head at a brown painted thrift shop chest under a wavery mirror. Dave found underwear and socks empty, bourbon bottles with supermarket labels, candy bar wrappers, a cellophane bag with 3 dried-out donuts, moldy bread and white wax paper. He shut the drawers. Nothing else? A wastebasket out there. She ran the shiny tube of the vacuum over faded plaid window curtains that matched the spread on the sagging bed. He dead or something? Or something, Dave said. In the morning sun glare, he squatted by the wastebasket, cardboard, papered in plaid, and lifted out another whiskey bottle and a cigarette carton. Under these was a folded section of newspaper. He put on his glasses and looked it over. Circled in red pencil was the story of Rick Wendell's murder. The page number was 17, and Billy hadn't lied. The address of the Canyon house was there. Dave tore off the sheet, folded it, pocketed it, took a second newspaper section from the basket. This wasn't from the Times. It was from a local advertising throwaway, and there was a spread on the Mr. Marvelous contest to come, with pictures of, among others, Rick Wendell. He and Ace Keegan flanked Robbie Reich, who wore the little white shorts. A lot of other men were in the pictures. Owners, contestants, most of whom Dave had met on his tour of the bars. Captions identified them and named their places of business. The text didn't say what kind of business they were. This was a family paper. It was dated a week ahead of the murder, so Billy had lied about one thing. He'd known his son was alive and well, and where to find him. Dave tore off his sheet and pushed it in with the other one. The wastebasket held another bottle, a pizza tin, gummy with sauce, weighted paper napkins, a waxed cup with Coca-Cola trademark, and then the torn-up pieces of a letter. Dave fitted the ragged edges together on the gritty black top. My dear son, you will have forgotten me, and no wonder, since your mother and I came to a parting of the ways years ago, but I want to say how proud I am to read in the paper that you are a success in life, even though your father has not. The writing, sprawling and unsteady, broke off there. Dave tucked the fragments into the pocket with the news sheets and poked into the wastebasket again. a half-eaten hamburger in its gold foil, Jack in the box wrapper, a corn chip bag, last week's TV guide, and that was all. Dave dumped the trash back into the basket, got to his feet. Brushing his hands together, he called thanks to the vacuuming girl and walked back to the motel office where the bony woman leaned on the lower half of the Dutch door, drinking coffee from a mug with a yellow, round smile face on it and eating a pastry. Dave asked, "He had a home away from home, right?" She nodded. "Lucky's," she said, "right up at the corner. You can't miss it." A glass and steel phone booth waited beside the Spanish bayonets. He stepped into it, dragged the phone book on its chain from under the little corner shelf, and thumbed the gritty pages. The yellow ones. He found the listing hang 10. It had a red pencil mark around it, like the mark around the story of Rick Wendell's death. In the paper, he dropped the directory on its chain and got into the Electra. The radio went on with the ignition. A Beethoven quartet, one of the Rasmovskys, he thought. He sat and listened to it for a minute before he let the brake go and rolled along the block to the lonely buildings huddled on the corner in the sun. Out the open door of Lucky's came an eye-steamed smell of pine disinfected inside. Someone short and fat, cocooned in a big white apron, mopped a floor of worn black vinyl tile. Little big metal insects, stunned by the smell, stools stood, legs up on the bar, chairs on little tables. There was a big metal bucket with rubber rollers on top. When the stubby bean dropped the drizzly gray strings of the mop between these, levered them closed, and pulled, there was loud squealing. Dave coughed. The mop wielder turned. The face was round, white, weathered, like an apple forgotten in a cellar. "You're just a shade early for a drink." "I don't need a drink," Dave said. "I'm an insurance investigator, and I've got a question or two about one of your regulars, Billy Wendell." "Insurance?" The popping of dirty soap bottles was audible in the hush. "That mean he's dead?" "Do they die a lot?" Dave wondered. "They're not young, most of them." The mopping began again. Cigarette butts fled from side to side. "Billy hasn't been around last couple nights. Was why I asked." "He's not dead," Dave said. "Gone off to find his wife and kid, then." The mop went into the bucket again. The cigarette butts drowned. "I didn't think he'd have the nerve. They talk like that, you know. Daydreams, drink dreams. I've got customers been planning to break out, change their lives for years. Never do it. Truth, most of them never did do nothing. Never will. I only know two kinds of people in this life. Them that make things happen. Them that things happen to." The mop went to work again. "And Billy Wendell?" Dave asked. He'd been talking about his son. Read a piece in the paper about him. How he's got his own business. Chunky elbows bent and straightened. Billy was proud of him. "Success," he says. "Not a failure like his old man." Dave backed from the wet sweep of the mop, and the little figure bowed into sunlight from the door. The voice hadn't let him be sure of it, but he decided now that she was a female, a fat little woman of 50, in men's clothes with a man's haircut. When he got fired from the used car lot, Billy says it was okay with him. He could go back to his son. His son would look after him. His son wouldn't let his old man go down to destruction. Billy was here every night? Oh, he'd get economy spells. Excuse me. She nodded, and Dave stepped out onto the sidewalk while the mop spread dirty suds across the door sill. The woman leaned the mop against the door, wiped fat little hands on the wraparound apron, stepped out, blinking into the sun. There'd be a night or two he'd drink in his motel room. A stubby thumb jerked in the direction of the cinder block buildings under the neon anchor up the weedy block. But he'd miss the company. We'd miss him, too. It gets like a family place like this, so he'd soon be back. TV's poor company, you know. Nothing to drinking alone. Monday night, Dave said. Was that one of the times you tried TV? Monday? She looked back into the dark bar as if the answer might come from there. Then she looked at him again, and her face puckered into a grin. Nah, not Monday. Hell, we had a celebration Monday, birthday party for Lillian. Lillian Drill and her old man. They've been coming in here, must be 5-6 years. Lillian's just the most fun. Everybody loves Lillian. No. Billy was here till 2. till closing. All the regulars were here, Billy especially. They're set. Him and Lillian. How's that? Dave asked. The beautiful people, the pudgy woman said. You heard that expression? Nah, I don't mean these days, but once Lillian was in pictures in the 30s, and Billy, everybody's seen his photos. Polo plane, horse shows, yachts. He was handsome, money, high life. Yep, him and Lillian, they're set. What time did he get here? Monday night? 5 in the afternoon. He built sandwiches while I frosted the cake. I always bake the cakes myself. Store-bought. They're sawdust. Baked it, decorated it myself. My old man was a baker before he decided there was more money in booze. She poked inside the apron and brought out a crushed pack of cigarettes. She lit one with a paper match and blew the smoke at the sidewalk. She wore tennis shoes, child size. Thing he couldn't remember was the booze was for the customers. Killed him anyway. I decorated the cake. She gestured in the ear. Lucky's own movie queen. That's what I wrote on it. She gave a little laugh and shook her head. Lillian cried. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.